Hey everyone, it's Holmes from Homestorybooks, and today I'm here during Pride Month to share with you some books that have LGBTIQA themes that aren't mentioned on the blurb. These are books that I picked up and was very much enjoying, then enjoyed all the more because of the LGBTIQA themes and characters in the book. Let's get into the books, shall we? First, a favorite of mine, A Concise Chinese-English Dictionary for Lovers by Xiaolu. This is about a young woman who immigrates to London and decides to keep a diary in English to help her improve. The language in this book is incredible. As the book progresses, the protagonist's English gets better and better, which is I think what happened when Xiaolu wrote the book itself, so it's wonderful to see language undergo such a transformative process. The main character, Zhuang, or Z, is from a very conservative Chinese family. I love the way she grapples with Western culture in all its eccentricities. She's so playful with her language in the diary, and I found myself laughing over possessive nouns, present participles, and prepositions. One of my favorite aspects of the book is how Z learns about her sexuality throughout the book. Growing up in a conservative family, she didn't really learn about sex at all and thought, as most young Chinese women do, that tampons are only supposed to be used by married women and you're not allowed to go swimming on your period. She goes to strip clubs purely out of curiosity, discovers porn, and her friend gives her a vibrator for her birthday at her request. When her friend starts giving Z instructions on how to use it, everyone at the table completely loses it and bursts out laughing. Z is confused. If the West is so sexually liberal, why are they so awkward? She discovers that friends of hers are queer or LGBTIQA+, and that was one of my favorite parts of her character arc. She looks at queerness through this traditional Chinese patriarchal lens and gradually breaks that down into something truly beautiful. I love this book. It was a 5-star read for me, and there are so few books that discuss queerness in a Chinese context that I think this book is really valuable. A random aside, but the one book that discusses LGBTIQA people that is from mainland China that I know of is Beijing Comrades by Beijing Tongzhi, and I had such high hopes for it. I won't talk about it for long in this particular video, but the protagonist, Han Dong, is a fuckboy, a manipulative, cold, and patriarchal businessman. The writing feels hastily written. There are rarely details about anything other than the relationship itself. Very few details about anything other than a cursory comment on the weather or the layout of a house. For a few chapters, Tongzhi, which is a pen name and means comrade, I believe, writes from Han Dong's partner's perspective, Lan Yu. I loved Lan Yu. I devoured those pages. They were so compelling and I was so hooked. And then for the rest of the book, we returned to Han Dong's perspective, and he started complaining about how Lan Yu wasn't paying enough attention to him. Ugh, such a shame, such a disappointment, because I know how singular queer Chinese books can be. It did make for a very interesting book club discussion though, and I appreciated that aspect a lot, although this did make me all the more grateful for the Chinese, Taiwanese, and Asian American books I do love, like A Concise Chinese English Dictionary for Lovers, and others that I mention in this video. The next book I want to recommend is Kiss of the Fur Queen by Tomson Highway, which is about two boys, Champion, or Jeremiah, and Unimitu, or Gabriel Okimasis. They're taken from their home into Indian residential school, and they're not allowed to speak their language anymore. Their hair is cut off, their identity is gradually stripped away until they're free of it years later, coming back together to live with each other. Jeremiah finds happiness and solace through music. Gabriel dances, he becomes a professional ballet dancer, and Gabriel is queer. When I first read that Gabriel was queer, my heart leapt out of my throat. I loved the book and the character of Gabriel so much more. He was a young gay First Nations man in the 70s and 80s in Winnipeg. He'd been chewed up and spat out of the toxic residential school system and was now in another toxic environment. And yet he was one of the world's best dancers, and yet he smiled as easily as sunshine. He loved as easily as breathing. Jeremiah and Gabriel are often at odds when it comes to his queerness, though not necessarily in a homophobic way. Jeremiah has lots of institutionalized colonial practices and beliefs from his experiences at residential schooling, and Highway has these brothers have very emotional, powerful, and liberating conversations where Jeremiah actually unlearns those beliefs purely by Gabriel's presence. The Fur Queen, too, the trickster, is genderless according to Cree myth. They can appear as female, male, or any other option along the spectrum, and so while Highway writes her as a woman, there are no limits to the forms she can take, and that is powerful when it comes to Indigenous LGBTIQA and Two-Spirit sovereignty as well. Please read this book. I rated it 5 stars and I adored every word. No One Can Pronounce My Name by Rakesh Satyal is another example of a book that surprised me with its queer themes. No One Can Pronounce My Name is about an Indian American community in Cleveland and all of their trials and tribulations. This book is told from multiple perspectives, my favorite of which is Ranjana, who is a mother, wife, dental assistant, I think, an aspiring writer of women's fiction featuring Indian vampires. She encounters a young queer Indian man and is at first shocked, then curious, then shocked, then curious, and on it goes. I loved their dynamics and conversations. Once again, I love being able to look at queerness through a different cultural lens and how that lens then influences that aspect of queer culture. In one part of the book, Satyal acknowledges Section 337 of the Indian Penal Code, which is a section of the law which calls for maximum punishment of life imprisonment from all carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal, primarily interpreted to be homosexuality, especially sodomy, including between consenting adults, which, by the way, was introduced by the British Empire. No such code had existed prohibiting anything before then, and my jaw just about hit the floor. It was so incredible to read that piece in a fiction book, and that's why I love fiction. We can explore politics and the way humanity responds to those politics, but in a great story. This book is about coming into yourself and becoming who you really are, and how you feel most comfortable, and the uphill battle that comes along with it. It's about fitting in, standing out, and everything in between. I loved it so much. Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeleine Thien is the book I'm currently reading and really enjoying at the moment. It's a family saga, partially set in the time of Mao's Cultural Revolution, and then the next generation, who become protesters in Tiananmen Square. It's a long, chunky, sprawling book of a novel with some beautiful language. Thien employs lines like quivering like a fresh bag of tofu. She nearly dropped her soul. His voice barely louder than the steam from his tea. I didn't expect to fall in love with the characters as much as I did, but they really grew on me as they grew up in the book. Some of the more political or historical aspects or implications of the book still really go over my head, but one did not escape me. Thien creates queer characters in Mao's revolutionary China, and she revisits them again and again. She didn't have to do that, but this creative choice made me gasp so loudly my wife came upstairs to ask if I was okay. I said I wasn't, but I was. But I wasn't. This book is a slow burn. It has such a commanding, sweet spirit, and there are so many layers. Social, cultural, political, and weaved into it all a wonderful story with gorgeous melodic language. I've been buddy reading this with Erin and loving it so far. The last book I'm going to talk about today is The Mara Thieves by Cherie, Dimaline, which is a post-apocalyptic young adult novel about a First Nations boy named Frenchie, who I believe is Métis. He meets people who are Inuit, Cree, Anishinaabe, and Dimaline herself is Métis from Georgian Bay Métis Nation. The timeline in this book gets a little lost, which makes it difficult to enjoy the story at certain points. The representation feels so genuine and so authentic. So imagine how I felt while reading it and discovered one of the characters was LGBTIQA+. One of the things I loved about this was Dimaline made it important without making it the character's defining characteristic or the cornerstone of their identity. The ending is so fantastic. Endings to books must be one of the most difficult parts to write. Lots of endings for me are satisfying, partly anticipated, and I partly look forward to them too. There are endings that I'm fine with, though I don't necessarily like them. I understand why the author set it up the way they did. Then there are endings like the ending for The Mara Thieves. Holy fucking shit, I almost dropped the book. I might have actually cried. Joy poured out of my heart and filled me up. I don't like young adult as a genre, but I don't have to love this book. That's it, that's all for these recommendations. I feel a little bad for spoiling or revealing that there are queer themes in this book, because for me, part of the joy of these books was discovering it while I was reading. But queer themes are one of those things that make me pick up a book easier than anything, along with other buzzwords. so I wanted to share these with you. Any unexpected queer moments or themes in books, I'd love to know. See you soon. Bye everyone.